No, we didn't play snakes and ladders. We didn't play go fish. I didn't coach you in football or baseball.
You made me a goddamn weapon.
I just wanted to help you become the best you.
If you, loved me, maybe you could talk to some of your human friends that would want to see me dead, rather than unleashing me to slaughter my brothers and sisters!
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about future films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar, that's me.
And me.
And this week we are talking about Hellboy 2019, the Poochie of Hellboy movies. And I would like to start by apologizing for the things I said about Hellboy to the Golden Army last week. All the complaints I've made about it.
Amazing, yeah. Me too. I'm so sorry, Guillermo del Toro. Please don't smite me with Mexican voodoo.
Yeah. Okay, pause the podcast. I think this is a pauser because I'm going to reveal a lot of plot details from the comic which are carried over into the movie, which are important
That's
Hellboy
rare, actually.
lore plot points.
If you're interested in reading
so if you
the
do
Hellboy
like,
comics,
if you've been reading Hellboy and you like it, I do highly recommend you read The Wild Hunt and The Storm and the Fury, which I think are like volumes 9 and 12, because there's a lot of like massive reveals in there, and some of those same reveals are in this
film
movie.
Yep.
So the comic we're looking at this week, we looked at two, The Wild Hunt and The Storm and the Fury. This is kind of part of a climactic trilogy of Hellboy. The first one was Darkness Calls, then came Wild Hunt, then came Storm and the Fury, where it kind of culminated a lot of the apocalyptic storylines and stuff that have been building up for years and years in Hellboy comics, and what was his destiny, what was he created for, all that kind of stuff.
It brought together a lot of plot threads
Yes.
and reintroduced a lot of characters.
Yes, and a lot of characters that you thought you're never going to see again come back.
But also some new ones.
And new ones,
Up here
yep,
too.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And it kind of abandoned some of its pulp origins. A lot of that pulpiness is gone. It's quite serious, mythic, epic stuff. There is some superhero fist fights in there for sure. In fact, Hellboy keeps turning down magic swords and choosing to fight with his fists instead, again and again.
That's true.
So that kind of stuff's still in there. This time around, at this stage, Hellboy has been drawn for a while, many times by Duncan Fegredo. Now, as I said, I think last week, and I think everybody should go back and listen to the last 2 weeks' episodes, because they all kind of build up as well to this.
Great.
When Mike Mignola stopped drawing Hellboy, I immediately backed out. I'm like, no more for me. But reading these volumes, I was like, wow, Duncan Fegredo, and he was a great artist at the time, even before he ever worked on Hellboy. He's a really very detailed art style, not at all like the almost abstract style that Mignola has, but hyper-realistic almost, especially people's like gestures, body language, all that kind of stuff is really very highly realistic. So it's a really interesting kind of mix coming into this world, but they seem to really be in sync, on the same page, so to speak. So it starts out with Hellboy. He's not in the BPRD anymore. He's quit. He's kind of been wandering around, having all sorts of adventures, which we hear about in like flashbacks and footnotes telling us that this happened. Some of them
we get a few volumes in between.
Oh,
so, yeah.
There have been like 5 volumes, and there's some...
Hellboy's
seems like there was some
adventures.
spooky stuff, some scary, heavy stuff happened in there as well, like him getting killed and coming back to life. We get these images of this kind of like red door, and so we don't know what's past there. It must be something scary because we don't get to see what's beyond it. We get Hellboy thinking about that door, and that's kind of it, stuff like that. So he's been living in Italy with these 2 old ladies who turn out to be ghosts. They're always ghosts. And he gets a letter. He gets called from this club.
We'll always get a Mignola-esque kind of cut in a panel where there'll be ghosts.
Yeah, or there'll be corpses. So he'll be talking to normal people, and then finally, at some point in the next you'll flip the page or something, and the person will be a skeleton that he's talking to, and the skeleton's still
a
talking.
decaying corpse.
Yes.
And there's no transition.
No. It's just like, does he see them as people, and other people would see them as corpses? We don't really know what's going on, but it's
Doesn't really
just
matter.
it's just like a cape in a superhero comic. It just happens all the time. It's just there.
Yeah.
So he gets this letter from this club called the Osiris Society or something in England, and they're like, he goes up there, there's some old dudes that he knows, but they haven't aged in 50 years or something since the last time he saw them. And they're like, yeah, so some giants have been waking up, and we need you to come out on this hunt with us to hunt them down, which is a thing we normally do. The last one was a long time ago or something. Usually it's only one or two.
But there's 4 this time.
There's more, like up in Ireland and Scotland and stuff. They're waking up all over the place, and they're like, you want to join us on this hunt? And he goes down. They take him down to the basement. They've got all these heads of giants that they've previously killed. Hellboy's like, holy cow, like, this is pretty impressive stuff. He's pretty impressed by it. Also, there's a picture of Professor Broom, his adopted father, now deceased, up on the wall, and it was maybe a deciding factor. He's like, yeah, I'll join you guys. So he goes out on this hunt with them, but he's betrayed.
Yes.
And the guys on the hunt kill him. They stab him, and there's some kind of spear.
He's really hard to kill.
Yeah, sorry. They try to kill him. They
pretty much stab him through the heart from behind, or through the chest.
With some kind of electrified spear of some sort. And meanwhile, we get this very bizarre scene, which you cannot imagine Mignola having drawn, but Fegredo draws the hell out of it, where this kind of wild boar, humanoid, kind of anthropomorphized boar is talking to like a hedgehog, this cute looking little hedgehog creature, and they're arguing about they need a queen, and they've got something in this woman's body is in this box, and she's going to be resurrected. And
the boar man says the queen's in the box.
Yeah, and the hedgehog's like, we need to speak to the queen. She's supposed to rise up and lead our armies and stuff, and we don't know quite where this is going yet. Hellboy is resurrected by a talking bird. He's not resurrected. He's met by a talking bird, which he had dreamt about earlier. He had a dream about this bird and seeing an elf king. He had an elf king
all the time in this comic.
Yes,
there are just constant visions.
Yeah. So that he had a dream about this elf king, the funeral of an elf king, and it was being explained to him by this bird. Now when he wakes up after being stabbed, this bird is talking to him. And the hunters that he betrayed him have been wiped out by the giants. And now Hellboy he has been given this flower, which he holds and makes him invisible. It's just a great little detail. You hold this flower and then you're invisible. And then he comes across the giants, but he's talking and stuff. And the birds like, stop talking because they can hear you. And the giants are like, look around. Hellboy's like, screw this. And he drops the flowers and he decides to fight the giants. He tries to fist fight them out in the open.
Yeah.
Then we don't really see what happens after that.
Cuts away. I think Hellboy's brain cuts away, actually. We find
out later. So he's led. So later we see that the bird leads him to this cottage where there's this girl, Alice. And Alice turns out to be the girl who was the little baby in The Corpse. That story we talked about 2 weeks ago. One of my favorite Hellboy stories, which I never would have had a follow-up to it. But this is it. And she's kind of grown up. And he says that he's visited her. He used to visit her when she was a kid. He used to pop by once in a while.
Yep.
Knew her parents. But he hasn't. Now it's been like 40 years.
It's been like 50 years.
50 years since the last time.
She doesn't look 60.
She hasn't aged.
She has some fairy magic going on.
She's been visiting the fairies, even after they tried to abduct her. They haven't tried to abduct her since, but she's been hanging out with them.
She's very touched.
Yes.
She doesn't have a normal life. Can't have a normal destiny after having spent a little time with the fair folk.
Yes. So...
Hellboy hasn't seen her in 50 years, so it's okay for her to sleep with him.
Yeah, does she see this? Kisses him. I don't know if
I think it's implied they're having a relationship.
Really? Oh, maybe you're right. There is a gap there. Yes, you're right. No, you're right.
Because that would be just so gross.
Yeah. Okay. So this, meanwhile, the wild boar character, this cartoon, Grugark, he is approached by this man who I guess was Astroth, who's from a previous Hellboy. He's been in
Hellboy's father.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So not his adopted father, not Professor Broom. This is his, I guess you would say, biological.
His Hellfather. Yeah. Okay.
He's Hellboy's Helldad.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But
he's one of the people with a finger on the scales here. So
right.
A lot of people's gambits are kind of piling up in this comic.
Absolutely.
And Astaroth has brought a cup of blood.
He's got a chalice full of blood. He's drained the blood from everybody in this village, and he's given it to the Gruagach. And the thing is, we get a cutaway of a panel in the village, and we just see corpses of people, like it's like a husband and wife in bed. They just look normal. They just look like they're asleep, but they're like lifeless, I guess is the thing. By the way, we haven't mentioned in any of these episodes the coloring by Dave Stewart on all these volumes is astounding. And
it does look good.
He really, when you go between different scenes, like spooky scenes, you got that kind of bluey tone and stuff, and it looks really amazing. So he pours the blood into the box with the bits of this woman. So the witch, we find out there was a witch in here, Nimue, and she'd been cut into pieces, but the pieces, there's a funny like single panel where you see they would like come together, like there's an arm, just like a dismembered arm, just like kind of bouncing along in the grass trying to find the other part. So they put them all in one box.
It's like the Iron Man.
Yeah. So he pours the blood in, and then she pops out of the box fully formed.
Bright red.
Bright red,
like
and then she
Hellboy.
wears this red robe, which is amazingly colored as well, because we got all these blue night scenes, and it really pops.
Does look great.
So she comes back. Meanwhile, Hellboy goes to meet Queen Mab because Alice had been told by Mab that like Mab had something to say to him. They meet this weird character who calls himself the Duke of Gloucester, and Hellboy's like, he's like this weird impish thing with big ears. He's like a kind of almost Yoda type.
Yep.
And he says, I'm the Duke of Gloucester. And Hellboy says, that doesn't sound right. And he's like, no, you're right. It probably isn't right. And he's got a tear streaming down his eyes. Really funny little dude. Really masterful ear for dialogue.
Like a Hellboy interaction. Like
Yeah.
a more traditional Hellboy interaction.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Hellboy just exchanging banter with magical creatures.
Yeah. The creature's like really sad about it. But the ear for dialogue is really amazing in all this stuff. But they're actually betrayed. Did they meet with Mab? Yeah, Mab says, yeah, you have this destiny, you need to, I can't remember what exactly she says, but she says you have to fight this army that Nimue is raising. Yeah. But this guy, Gloucester, Duke of Gloucester, takes them, betrays them, they're attacked, Alice is poisoned in this fight, and then 3 birds show up. This is quite normal, animals show up, speaking animals show up. They're like, hey, we can heal her, but you need to go to this place. They go to this castle that's surrounded by fire, Hellboy has to have this huge fist fight with this guy on the bridge and beats him. It's a really cool fight with this demon.
Really cool looking demon too. He's like biomechanical. He's got horns coming out of his eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's sort of an animated suit of armor, and there's big jets of steam coming out his back.
Yeah.
Rad.
It's very great. It's a great fight. They go in there. It turns out Morgan Le Fay is in there. Morgan reveals to Hellboy that he is actually a descendant of King Arthur.
Yes.
Through the female line.
Yeah.
And so he had a human mother who was a witch, and she had married a demon.
A goat.
While she was alive, she used to ride this goat to the Sabbath.
Yeah.
She used to fly on this goat.
I think she actually marries Astaroth in the comics.
Well, it is in the so I guess it is Astaroth.
Sorry, in the film it's like
she dies, and then Astaroth claims his bride after she's dead, and then she goes.
There's an early Hellboy comic with this sequence
right.
where Hellboy goes and sees a kind of reenactment, a spooky reenactment of it. She repents on her deathbed, as people want to do, and a priest and a nun are there to pray over her grave, but it's not enough.
Right.
Astaroth comes to claim his bride.
Yeah, right. So all these forces are kind of converging, and it turns out that Nimue, our enemy witch, is trying to summon the was it Ogdru?
The Ogdru Jahad.
So from way back from Volume 1, that cosmic horror, that seven-headed, the 7 that are one, which she calls the Black Dragon, she's trying to summon it down.
Everyone's always trying to summon the Ogdru Jahad, either in Hellboy or in BPRD comics.
Yes.
Yeah, it's always the kind of final boss.
Yeah. Yeah. So she thinks it's going to, like, come down to earth, and all she cares about is death and destruction. She doesn't want to rule anything. She just wants complete bloodshed, this sort of thing. By the way, she was brought back by Gruagach because he just wanted revenge on Hellboy for beating him up when he was in the shape of that baby, and then he made the Grom, the monster. So Gruagach had summoned that big Grom monster, which is the big warthog thing, to fight Hellboy, but then Hellboy beat it, and then Grom ate Gruagach, and then Gruagach soul took over that thing and it shrunk down, and that's why he's in this current form, and he wants revenge on Hellboy for that.
He wants revenge. He's been cursed to the form of a pig, and also Hellboy burned him with iron.
Yes.
He's very grumpy about being burned with iron.
Yeah, and Nimue thinks Nimue is going to put him back to his old form, and she doesn't care. She's like,
no.
In fact, he accuses her of not being able to do it at one stage. He's been waiting so long. He's like, you can't do it, can you? And she's so angry, she kicks him out, and that he's like ruined by that. So we get a gigantic fight. So Hellboy is offered Excalibur by Morgan Le Fay. He takes it, and it's supposed to raise the armies of the noble dead. So Morgan Le Fay's castle, all these old soldiers are hanging from the rafters, literally hanging them from nooses for whatever reason. But when you get to the next volume, we see that these dead have been rising. They're amassing somewhere. Hellboy doesn't know where, but he doesn't want to lead them. He's like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. I don't want to use Excalibur in this fight. I want to find some other way. So it basically leads to a big fight where he fights with Nimue, but Nimue, the Ogre Jihad is actually entering into her. It's possessing her. She has a giant Tetsuo arm that forms. She uses it to fight the witches that betrayed her, because the witches back 500 years ago or 1500 years ago were like, when the Ogre Jihad first started talking to her, they were like, she's crazy, we got to kill her off, and that's why they killed her in the first place. She fights her, Hellboy manages to kill her, but her spirit kind of is still there and rips at his heart, and he dies. The apocalypse has started. England is like struck by these amazing lightning bolts, which are drawn in tiny panels, but are really epic somehow. It's like the fist fight panels are 3 times the size of these lightning bolts hitting like Big Ben and stuff, but it's still somehow really massive the way it's been drawn and colored and everything. And Hellboy after that ends up in hell, and the follow-up series is called
Hellboy in Hell.
Yeah. Now, are there any other important points that we need to go through in here?
No, I think you pretty much covered the plot. There's an odd digression where King Arthur comes back by possessing an old World War One. A
World War I soldier whose family had a history of being all bad people. So this guy wanted to be a good person, so he went off to World War I, and he was about to die in the trench, but then the angel appeared to him.
It's very odd.
And resurrected him, and that's the person that Alice gives Excalibur to be possessed by Arthur.
It was heavily implied it was his destiny. He lived long past his time. He was about 120 years old or something.
Yes.
And
it's actually an amazing scene, because he's living in this pub, and this pub that's being run secretly by Queen Mab. We don't know it's a Mab, but he's led down. She's like, Mab tells the story to Alice about this soldier, and then he comes down the stairs. He's a decrepit old man, but he's led by this hooded woman, angelic-looking woman figure, and it's kind of the opposite of the scenes we talked about before, because they put the crown on him, and he goes from being an old man to being Arthur, like when the crown is rested on his head.
Just from, again, it's not one of those instant transitions. We don't see him transforming or anything like that. It's just in one panel, he's a decrepit old man. In the next, he's youthful and strong and in full mail.
Yes. So, one thing that keeps coming up, I found in the series, was this was Hellboy's actions catching up with him. The people he's acted against. So Grugak, also that guy, the Duke of Gloucester, was actually somebody, he had killed their queen. This was some cannibal witch living in a cave, and he killed her queen, and that's kind of why he betrayed Hellboy. So all these old...
for Black Jessie or whatever.
Black Annis, I think her name was. So all these people are kind of coming back. Hellboy is... So we learned that when he fought those giants, he actually went into Wolverine Berserker mode and was being super violent and enjoying it. So it's his violent side. But there's a theme that comes up and goes through later Hellboy comics where he's sick of the violence. And he's sick of fighting all the time and violence being the solution again and again, and himself succumbing to it.
Yep.
So I think those are all kind of key themes. And another thing is...
He doesn't want to be anybody's pawn.
Yes.
He's very aware that everyone wants something from him.
Okay.
And in these, we have the constant Hellboy theme, which gets a little tiresome after a while, which is that everybody knows Hellboy's destiny better than he does.
Yes.
You'd think he'd be taking notes.
Yeah.
By this point, because every single decade someone appears to Hellboy and starts telling him about his destiny. And they always know more about it than he does. If he just listened, maybe he would remember. But, Morgan Le Fay's talking about his destiny. Queen Mab's talking about his destiny.
Yeah.
Nimue's talking about his destiny. his father's talking about his destiny.
Yeah.
His father wants him to lead the armies of hell and overthrow Satan.
Yes,
And
that's the thing. He's supposed to free all the demons in hell, kill Satan, and free them so they can rise up to the earth, take over the earth. The earth will be... The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse actually show up in this comic. They're going to destroy 2/3 of the population. The remaining third will be food for monsters.
Yes, that's quite
Yeah.
explicit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. These aren't my favourite comics.
Okay.
You know, I think I've mentioned in previous weeks that I really like the early ones, the pulp ones. In these, I completely agree that the art is great. I do prefer the Mignola art.
Yeah.
I really love the covers that he draws. And so I've checked out somewhat when the art transitions from Mignola to other artists. Even though he still writes them and he's heavily involved, you can see when you turn to the back of the volumes, you can see art that he's drawn as inspiration for the artists that work on the comic. I also feel by this point the comic's starting to collapse under the weight of its own mythos, because I understand it's thrilling sometimes to see, this is absolutely a problem with the film, is we have all these appearances from all of these characters from over the years of Hellboy, and it's just sort of starting to really pile up as well, and I feel like we've lost more interesting characters and characterizations by the wayside. The final antagonists of Hellboy are characters from Arthurian myth. That's a bit odd to me.
But this isn't the final.
No.
But I do feel like he's tying off a lot of stuff here, which he's been building up to, so he kind of had to do this. Yes. It's better than dragging out for 30 years like they did with the aforementioned Wolverine.
You're right, of course. It's just, for me, it's just not as thrilling.
Right.
I mean, we've abandoned characters like Hecate and Rasputin.
Yes.
Sort of like legends.
They'll come back later on. After he returns from hell, or in hell, he deals with all these people, and he comes back, and then we get...
You know, but in these 3 volumes, it's King Arthur, Morgan Le Fay, who hasn't been met. She just kind of pops up, and she's sort of... the mastermind.
She's one of them.
One of the masterminds. Yeah. She has a chessboard. Hellboy's on it.
Yes.
We get this. We return to this.
She's also
image.
a talking skeleton, right? Isn't she?
Yeah, she absolutely is.
Yeah.
Like, Hellboy will not be looking at a character.
Yeah.
And then in the next panel, over Hellboy's shoulder, they will be a talking skeleton.
Yes. Yes.
For me, it's a very Mignola kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think, and I'm always happy to see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the other thing is, I feel the Ogdru Jihad too. The Ogdru Jihad possessing Nimue, incidentally, the Lady of the Lake, another kind of tepid antagonist.
Okay.
I think, compared to earlier ones.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, the Lady of the Lake's not a very sinister figure. And she's also possessed by the Ogdru Jihad, and the Ogdru Jihad starts ranting at Hellboy. The Ogdru Jihad should not be talking. It's a Lovecraftian
that struck me. That
monster.
I kind of thought that too.
It's a horror from the abyss.
Yeah.
That your brain can't conceive.
Yeah.
You can only conceive it.
Yeah, and we're told that it was made by angels, by rogue angels.
This is the thing.
And it's like, well, why does this thing speak in English?
Yeah.
You're kind of at that level. It's
With every
I'm
volume
kind of
we
agreeing,
get...
but we do learn that at the end of the story, we're told that was only a portion of the Ogdru Jihad. It wasn't the full thing still out there in space, and they do end up having to fight that again.
I haven't read the Hellboy in Hell ones.
I'm going to get around to those. So Hellboy in Hell was actually drawn by Mignola. He came back to draw like 12 issues.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to reading those then.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about these. I kind of feel like there's been all this accrual, all this mythos has become barnacled on Hellboy, and he's a bit encumbered by it. I feel like the plot is kind of lumbering around with all of the weight of all these revelations.
Yeah,
and
possibly
moved away from kind of like Atlantis and Lemuria and all of these, and have, you know, the Arthurian mythos, the Matter of Britain. It's only about 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
So we've gone from the unknowable kind of like prehistory to kind of like...
I was interested, though, that he did, like, when it was revealed that she was trying to summon the Ogdru Jihad, I was like, oh my, that's like a great...
It's a good tie-in, because everyone always is...
Because the whole time I was thinking, this is a bit too, like, English, if you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, it's very localized.
Yes, that's one of... Absolutely, that's one of my...
It's like, what about all those Chinese monsters you were fighting a while ago and all that stuff? Like,
the fate of the world is in Britain?
Yeah.
Mike Mignola isn't even British.
He even says there isn't the location like Vigrid or something, the location of Ragnarok.
The plane of Vigrid is not in the British Isles, okay?
Yeah, right.
It couldn't be.
Right.
It couldn't be.
Yeah.
And then they mentioned Ragnarok. It's the first time anyone's mentioned Ragnarok in hundreds of pages. Queen Mad randomly mentions it. So why are you talking about Ragnarok? That's Norse mythology, and
I guess it's all the same apocalypse.
is
Is the
Celtic?
point we're getting to.
I feel like it's the scale is shrunk, and it's ironically it's partly because we have to tie together too many things.
I kind of see what you mean, but I actually see it as this. If you look at them as a whole, the scale is much larger, because those other things were like the corpse is like, oh, this baby's been kidnapped. I gotta go save this baby. 10 pages.
Yeah.
Whereas now we've got this absolutely massive thing. As I said, you see London being destroyed. And there's armies, whole armies coming in, swarming in from all over the place. By the way, there's a moment where I do have to mention where Baba Yaga's in this. She's been in previous Hellboy comics, and he needs to get across this army into the castle where Nimue is, and he can't unless he summons his Hell army, and he says, oh, I'm not going to do it. But Baba Yaga's
either
like...
the Hell army or the Excalibur army.
And Baba Yaga's like, I'll get you across there, but you got to give me your eye, which was a deal we made. Or you owe me something, so I want your eye. And he gives it to her.
He shot out her eye in an earlier comic.
Right. And he's like, okay, here you go. And it's like cut to the next panel, she's holding his eyeball.
It's a pretty cool image.
And it's really great.
That's okay, because and Grugak, I don't mind. As you say, I don't mind the idea that this one shot about a changeling baby.
Yeah.
Kind of is the pebble that sets off the avalanche of this version. There are so many different apocalypses in Hellboy and BPRD, but this version of the apocalypse, he kicked it off. And then at the end, it's strong. He's kind of really Destiny's. He's really Fortune's fool. Grogak.
Oh yeah.
Because
then he tries to kill himself after she kicks him away, and Hellboy he says, "Please kill me." I tried to hang himself. Hellboy shoots him. He's still alive. Hellboy's like, "Can't do anything for you," and leaves.
Yeah. Well, he's been cursed to not die and watch the ruin of the apocalypse unfold by Merlin.
Oh yeah, he talks to Merlin, that's right. He has a chat with the ghost of Merlin on Merlin's grave. Yeah.
Oh, Merlin, yeah, and he curses him. He says, you've done all this because of pride and vanity and maybe a desire to restore the green fields of England to the way they were before the coming of man, but he's like, that's not going to happen. It's all just going to be bones and ash, and you're going to be here to watch it.
Yes.
He tries to hang himself. And then at the end, Morgan Le Fay shows up and she says to him, you were my favourite piece in all of this, the one of which I was the fondest. And she rescues him from Merlin's curse, and Merlin nearby in his grave, because Merlin notoriously buried alive. Someone goes, no!
Yes.
And then she takes him, and then she and Grogak leave into the netherworld.
Yeah. So, Astaroth is never named, and I think Merlin is never named.
No, they're not.
So you're kind of
only
in the woods if you haven't been really following along.
Only at the end, Morgan Le Fay says, I'm of a mind to lift Merlin's curse on you. And then I went, oh, that guy was Merlin.
That guy was Merlin. Right, exactly. Right.
Yeah, pretty rad comics.
Yeah. The other one we got here is Hellboy in Mexico. I just want to mention this one issue because this is another issue. This one was drawn by Richard Corbin, and it's just a one-shot 30-issue thing where Hellboy goes down to Mexico. He tells a story about how in the 50s he hooked up with these three luchadores brothers who were out like hunting monsters, and Hellboy had gone down to hunt monsters too because they're having a monster problem in Mexico. And one of the brothers got abducted and disappeared, and then they saw a sign advertising a like luchador fight between that brother, now called Kamazots, and Hellboy versus Hellboy. So he goes, and the fight's in like a
Aztec temple,
and
like a ziggurat.
And, he fights this guy in the ring. They get in a wrestling ring. He wrestles this dude. He's wearing a Mexican wrestler mask. He pulls it off. He's got like a vampiric face underneath. He sprouts wings. Hellboy smashes him down on one of the turnstiles, which has been damaged, and that, like, pierces his heart and kills him.
Importantly, he deliberately kills him.
Yes.
To save him from the life of undeath.
Yes.
And he thanks him. He says, thank you, Hellboy.
Yes. And this was during a period when Hellboy was like on a drinking binge in Mexico for 6 months. There's a lot of stories set in Mexico during this period where he was going through a bad time.
This is the only one I've ever read.
Yeah.
So Richard Corbin did the art.
Yes.
You and I have a bit of a point of disagreement about his art.
Yeah.
I tend to think his people kind of look like potato men.
They look like Muppets for sure. Absolutely.
But
this is Muppets Hellboy in
so
Mexico.
great because there are no normal people in it.
No, and there's wrestling. It's like really you want to.
It's so great.
Yeah.
I really I've been complaining about Storm and the Fury and Wild Hunt, but this comic Hellboy in Mexico is this is perfect. It's everything I love about Hellboy. Hellboy having a mini adventure.
Yeah.
Crazy art. It's really good.
Yeah.
Really, really great.
Yes.
I love I just love some of the scenes in the ziggurat and the monsters. There's a cheering.
Oh yeah, the crowd is all vampires. It's all vampires in the crowd.
Hellboy fight this big vampire in a luchador costume.
Yeah.
And it just looks so great.
Yeah.
And not adapted effectively.
No.
Which I guess is a segue to...
That is a great segue. Okay. So this movie came out in 2019, was directed by Neil Marshall, who's a respected horror director, Dog Soldiers and The Descent.
That's right.
Good movies. Yep. Good choice for a Hellboy movie. You would think.
You'd think so, especially one which was going to go for a horror tone.
Okay.
This is allegedly, Neil Marshall is on the record as saying what attracted him to the role, despite having big shoes to fill, obviously, because the previous director being Del Toro, was that they were going to do Hellboy with a horror tone. Okay. And he thought, yes, I can do that.
So, this movie is rated R in the US.
Yeah. Why is it rated R?
Well,
we know why.
Okay, opening line of the movie, the year is 517 AD, known as the Dark Ages, and for fucking good reason. This is the first line of the movie, and it's spoken by Broom.
Yeah. Broom, a absent-minded professor character in the comics, like a competent individual, but very much an academic. Here he's, right off the bat, it's Ian McShane.
Ian McShane, I was like, holy cow, great.
Channeling,
I'm here.
I guess his role in Deadwood or something.
It's a little bit of his... he's not quite as... I wouldn't go that far.
He's not throwing profanity around as much.
No, he's not a pimp who, steps on the necks of his prostitutes. It's not that far.
Okay, all right. That's an exaggeration, but he's certainly swearing a lot.
Everybody swears. Everybody swears all the time in this movie. But I also wanted to point out that usually a US R, which is 17 and over, in Australia becomes a 15 plus. I guess because Australian kids are harder. I'm assuming. Unless sometimes a really extreme movie will get R18 plus.
Yeah. If
it's really full on, and this one is 18 plus in Australia. Because the gore is so full on, but it's all CG gore, so it's a bit ridiculous. It's not none of it is practical.
No, you're right.
At all.
And, I mean, I might as well say it now. I saw an interview with Neil Marshall, and he stated outright that it was all added in post.
Yeah, of course it was.
No, by which I mean, but he had no...
Oh.
By which I mean, he had no hand in it.
Right.
By that point, they'd kicked him off the movie effectively.
Oh my god, okay. This is great. We'll get through all this stuff.
And they stuck all this over-the-top gore, cartoon gore in, and it's very much not his vision.
Right. Okay.
Or so he claims.
Yeah. So... Before we get into this movie, I really want to understand what is the psychology of the reboot.
Yeah.
Because it's going on all the time, especially with Batman. It surprised me when they did it with Hulk. I was like, oh, they're going to make another Hulk movie 3 or 4 years later that's a reboot. That to me was shocking at the time. And now it just seems like automatic, like there's not even a question. I think they know that their audience, because the only person that understands it's a reboot is people who are reading about this stuff all the time. Otherwise, you wouldn't know. If you go down to sit in the cinema, would you know what's going on?
If you're a fan
it seems like this.
Films.
Yeah, I think it's just you're narrowing your audience, or it's aimed at a very narrow audience. People who've only seen the last ones and know. I don't know. Maybe I'm not looking at this the right way, but it just seems very weird to me that it's so. And now we've got another reboot. I believe the next one is not a sequel. I think it's the one that's coming this year is going to be another reboot.
I admit,
4 years later.
Reboot seems the go-to, but I think you can have good... it seems to them that there are good reasons for doing a reboot. In this case, they want to jettison the baggage of Hellboy 2019, I suppose, when they're making Crooked Man.
Yeah.
But as far as this film goes, why is it rated R? Why make an R-rated Hellboy movie?
Yes.
The comics are absolutely not
R-rated. They're
quiet.
You see drips of blood. They're crap. He says crap all the time. In fact, that's his catchphrase. Hellboy's catchphrase is,
Ron
crap.
Perlman's Hellboy is saying crap a lot too.
Yeah.
So why... Okay, so I think we got two reasons why it's rebooted this way. First reason is because Hellboy 3 is not getting made.
Yeah.
Del Toro and Perlman, as we discussed last week, are not coming back for various reasons. They weren't able to get this film up when this film enters pre-production with a screenplay by Mignola and a guy called Andrew Cosby, who apparently is active in the comics world.
Okay.
Del Toro is not in line to be the director. Maybe they can't afford him anymore, I don't know. But they offer him a producer credit, he refuses. He wants to direct Hellboy 3. When Perlman finds out that Del Toro is not going to be the director, he also withdraws, as we discussed last week. So now, what do? You don't have Del Toro, you don't have Perlman. I guess you can't really make Hellboy 3 without those two talents.
Yeah.
So it seems like a reboot is what you go for.
You know
Second
what?
of all... Okay, hold that thought.
Yes.
Second of all, Deadpool. We've talked about it before. I think we're getting a little far away from Deadpool now, but I think this film still feels like a film made in the shadow of Deadpool.
Right.
So Deadpool, as our audience will know, when it came out, was the biggest performing Marvel movie ever, and it was R-rated.
Right.
You know?
Right. Okay. Right. Yes.
The film that almost didn't get made, and Ryan Reynolds basically had to wrestle through the gate. And then, of course, when it came out, and then we have films that come out after that, which seem to be in the Deadpool mode, especially DC films like Suicide Squad, with this kind of like much more grown up.
So
I don't think Suicide Squad is R-rated, but I feel like Deadpool had an R rating here in
the US
in the US and here in Australia. And I think this film, they're pursuing the R rating partly because of they want to capture that Deadpool magic, that Deadpool money. This is not something I've read online. This is something that just I think.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think there's also a feeling that...
and you can't make a sequel to Hellboy 1 and Golden Army that's R-rated. It just tonally wouldn't match. It has to be
that's right. It wouldn't totally match. I was about to say that Batman Forever did not have Michael Keaton or Tim Burton and was a sequel to those first two Batman movies. So it can be done.
Of course.
But they just didn't do it this time.
No, I don't
think I think they should have. But the other thing I was going to say was I think there's also that attitude of that movie was a long time ago, and the kids that watch that are now grown-ups that think that the word fuck is edgy.
Yeah.
And this is going to be an edgelord movie. This is absolutely what this is. And it's almost, it reminds me of Star Trek Picard, where they say fuck, and it's like, well, I can almost see the wheels turning. They're like, well, that show was 30 years ago, and those kids were 12 years old when they watched it, and they're grown-ups now, and they want this grown-up, edgy, edgelord Captain Picard show. Yep. And that's what this seems to be. But that's not what the Hellboy comic book is.
Perfect. Yep. That's a great deduction, because that's what this film is. This film can't make up its mind about what the tone is. Marshall signed up to do a horror film. This is not a horror film, despite having horror elements.
Yeah.
Instead, it shambles from kind of like a dark, serious tone to edgy stuff.
Yeah.
We have Hellboy in what I think of as his frat bro incarnation.
Yes, 100%. And we'll get into this as we get into the plot, because I want to talk about this.
Great.
Okay, so we start with, again, much like Golden Army, a lot of exposition that's hard to follow.
Yep.
A huge scene set in the year 517 where they kill Nimue, played by Milla Jovovich, who I did not recognize until the end credits. I saw her name and I was like, what? But I was like, oh, who's this easy on the eyes lady? The whole 2 hours, I was like, who's this? Then I was kind of like, she's a bit familiar. She got a leading role. She has to be maybe somebody I've seen before. And then, anyway. So we get a lot of exposition. We get it, and it's done in this kind of blue tone. And she wears the red gown. This is the one moment where you had a visual that was kind of like, oh, okay.
Oh, you must have been so optimistic at this point.
Oh, yes. but then he said the word... And for fucking good reason. In the opening line, I was like, I didn't know who was narrating at the stage, but I was like, why? How does this help set the tone of, like, the year 500 Arthurian knights fighting witches? Is this the language?
Right out the gate. The swearing in the very
Is this the language that King Arthur used? Well, like, what are we doing here? Okay, he cuts her to pieces with Excalibur.
Yeah.
Absolute hack and slash to pieces. They put her all into separate boxes, and immediately I was like, oh, okay, we gotta find this movie, we have to find the 5 boxes. Like the 3 pieces of the crown in order to put the queen back together. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Okay.
Yeah.
So...
Incidentally, the monologue says that he does it in 1 swing, but on screen he does it in 2.
Oh, right.
Really irked me.
Right. Love it. Okay, now we get David Harbour as Hellboy. He's in Mexico. David Harbour, this is his second show on the podcast, so he's in Extraction.
Oh, of course he was.
He's in Extraction, he's in Hellboy. I want to also point out that he is in Black Widow and he's in Suicide Squad, and he will be in the upcoming Thunderbolts TV show or whatever for Marvel or movie, which is playing his Black Widow character. And he was also voicing the upcoming DC, what was that? The monster show, Creature Commandos.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did your homework there?
So he's a gold medalist.
Yeah, very much so.
He is not a all-star.
No, not yet.
So he's in Mexico. He's looking for a BPRD agent that went missing.
While investigating a nest of vampires.
Yes.
And Hellboy, I think, has got a lead.
Yes.
His father asks him to use... He's talking to Professor Broom, and they're swearing at one another.
Yeah.
Great. And then...
they're very angry. Yep. Very angry at each other. And he's like, I'm going to follow this lead or whatever. And I think Broom is trying to get him to come back and send other agents in or something. I'm not sure quite what's going on.
They're squabbling over methods. Like, he wants him to keep a low profile.
Yeah.
And Hellboy says, I always use a delicate touch. And then he hangs up his smartphone with his stone finger, which promptly breaks.
I think it's just his regular finger breaks anyway.
No, it's his stone finger in this scene, and then his regular finger in a later scene, which doesn't make any sense.
That's what confused me. Okay.
It doesn't make sense.
Okay. Breaks the screen. He goes in there. It's a wrestling arena. So there's, much like the Hellboy Mexico comic book, he goes in there. He fights this. The wrestler actually
much like, because it's a very pallid...
No, it's a normal crowd. It's a human crowd, but this guy's wearing a mask, and then when Hellboy pulls it off, you see that he's a vampire underneath, and then he sprouts full wings, and then he kills him on the turnstile by accident.
Accidentally this
in
time.
this, and also this guy, when he dies, starts spouting something about how the apocalypse is coming. I'm like, how would he know?
Exactly. How would he know?
How does he know Hellboy's real name, which he mentions at the end as he's dying?
Right. How would he? Does being a vampire give you special insight into...
I also want to point out, at this point, we're 4 or 5 minutes of the movie. He goes by the name Camazotz, which was his name in the comic.
Yep.
But the expository dialogue is painful.
Yeah.
Like, Hellboy is talking to this guy in the ring, and he says, "What's up with the Camazotz crap? The BPRD sends you down here to investigate a nest of vampires, and you went silent about 3 weeks ago."
We already knew that as well.
We knew it, and why would you say it out loud to a person?
Yeah. And what's... Exactly. And we already knew it because they had the exact same conversation
in the car.
It was already unnecessary in the car, and it's extra unnecessary.
I would say you went silent 3 weeks ago. Why?
There is so much expository dialogue in this film.
Yes.
It is infuriating.
Yes.
This film is talking
but it's not just the amount, it's the poor quality of it. This is bad exposition, like really bad exposition.
It's just, and it's relentless.
Yes.
It's so he calls Hellboy, I think he calls him Muchacho El Diablo.
Yes. I like that.
Strange. Doesn't really mean Hellboy.
No, it doesn't, but okay, so the crowd. So when Hellboy walks in, he's wearing this hoodie, and the guy's like, Camazotz is like, "That's Hellboy," and he says, "Take off your robe," and he pulls down his. And people are like, "Oh, it's Hellboy," or something like he's semi-urban legend, not quite sure. But when the vampire's mask gets pulled off and sees a vampire, everybody freaks out and starts fleeing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, they're not scared of Hellboy. They're scared of the vampire. Do they know about vampires? Do they know about Hellboy? No. I don't know quite what's going on. When Hellboy gets back to the BPRD, we get a news report saying the semi-mythical Hellboy was spotted in Mexico. I'm like, wait a second, is he semi? Or, like, do you know what's going on here, people? Who's making this news report? Do you know if he's real or not? You have footage of him.
Yeah.
This is footage from many people's phones of Hellboy. What are we doing?
Yeah. What are we doing? What are we doing? It's this problem again that we discussed last week of... How do you deal with your characters being out and about in the world? You need a light touch, and this is not it.
So before he gets picked up by the BPRD, there's a moment where Scorpion is on his hand, and he's like, "I don't blame you, buddy, because you are what you are." And it's like, oh boy, this is some projection. Like, we're telegraphing the movie in the first 5 minutes here. Yeah. Come on, okay. Okay, Ian McShane. I wrote down Ian McShane, exclamation point, in my notes, because I was like, great, I love him. Not great in this movie, whatever. No. He gets sent, Ian sends him to England for the Wild Hunt. He says, go see the Osiris Club. They, like, worship Ra or something. Hellboy gives a line here, which about Rob being a close talker, which seems like it was left over from a Ron Perlman draft. Because he even delivers it in the same kind of low tone.
Yeah.
Oh, I knew Rob. He was a close talker kind of thing.
And that grumble.
Yeah. We meet the Grogok here.
Yeah, Grogok.
He's a CGI creature. He meets with Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga's like, hey, you should resurrect Nimue to get
vernacular
revenge.
kind of Londoner accent.
Is he supposed to be Irish or something?
No, it's kind of like a working class English accent.
Okay.
And of course, again, a lot of working class English vernacular. So a lot of effing.
Non-stop.
Just constant.
Every sentence.
And doesn't talk like a mythical creature, talks like...
No. And it's missing the kind of weird cuteness
like
he
a
had in the
gangster.
comic book.
Well, he's talking like a gangster.
Yeah, the first scene when you meet him, when he's trying to convince the hedgehog to join forces with him, it's so funny and strange and cute, like weirdly cute. And there's none of that here.
He's like a character from Snatch.
And Baba Yaga, I have to say, he's like from Snatch. Baba Yaga is a very scary creature design. And I love this creature design. And I wanted it to be in a different movie.
Yeah. Or a movie just... Yeah, exactly. That's the other...
Not in this movie.
We have constant references and digressions, right?
Yeah.
Where we cut away to a character... Like, the script is just terrible in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, we're just lurching from scene to scene, from digression to digression. Nothing links up properly. It's just all just a bunch of references that go nowhere.
Yeah.
Why is Baba Yaga in it? She has no stakes, no role in the film, except to be super creepy and to deliver a bunch of expository dialogue.
Yeah.
Everyone is always delivering expository dialogue. Every single character.
Yeah.
Usually in a terrible English accent.
Yeah.
There's another problem with this film, Kumar. Everyone's got a terrible English accent.
Yeah.
This is worse than Dick Van Dyke's
You know
English
who
accent.
has the worst, I would say, is Daniel Dae Kim, who is a good actor.
Yeah.
And I've seen him in many things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's an actor that I enjoy watching whenever he shows up in a TV show or whatever. I've always enjoyed him.
It's terrible.
And he shows up, he's got a terrible English accent. And that character in the comics is an American.
Yeah.
Isn't he like a commando or something? He's but he's American.
He's American.
Why is he British in this movie?
Yeah, why?
Why? You've got an American actor playing a character that was American. Why are we making him do this accent?
I don't know, and it's just awful. And the character's terribly written. They just do not know what to do with him.
He is another modern Star Trek character where he's just like abrasive. Yep. He's angry for why are you so angry at everybody else? For no reason.
Because this is where you get
character edgelord. Yes, character development.
Yeah.
It's not development, it's character existing, like this guy's angry.
This is where you get, like, tension between characters. You just make one an asshole for no reason.
Exactly, yeah.
There, look.
Yeah.
Look, this is where you get dramatic tension from.
Yeah.
By people being assholes to one another. It's so bad.
Yeah. Well, we haven't gotten him yet. I want to point out at this point, I made the note, this is where I wrote my notes, that all three of these movies have had cursed soundtracks. Yeah. So the first movie had
I don't mind the first one.
The first one had the "We're gonna give you Hellboy" song at the end, over the end credits, which was the worst song I've ever heard. The second movie had the jaunty Danny Elfman music in the horror scenes. This one had crud generic, like, buy it, like, free license guitar riff music. There's a few moments, I think we had "Welcome to My Nightmare" by Alice Cooper in there, and maybe one other, like, recognizable song, and the rest of it was just so bad.
I see this again as this I see as post-Deadpool soundtrack, where you have a bunch of, you throw in some recognizable rock tunes.
Yeah.
I remember Suicide Squad absolutely did this when they recut it and then they released that trailer with, like, the Rolling Stones and all this stuff. And this, they've got these recognizable rock tunes, and the rest is, as you say, generic, off-the-shelf, kind of like Cakewalk Pro metal riffs.
Yeah.
And again, this plays into Hellboy as edgy frat boy.
Yes.
He listens to metal.
Yes. So he arrives at the Osiris Club in England, much as he did in the comic. They've retained their age because they talk to this. They summon a demon, which is a bit like in the comic. They summoned this ghost spirit, which told them about the coming apocalypse, and they were kept young. And
why bother with that? Like, this is just point. I mean, it's not even correct to the comic. So it's not even a proper adaptation of what occurs in the comic. So in the comic, the Order is founded when a spirit talks to them in the 19th century and tells them about the apocalypse and about Hellboy and about how they need to use him or manipulate him, and then they'll be the kings of the future world. All very sinister and conspiratorial. Great. And then the way that's handled in the film is, oh, we just haven't aged since the 40s because a ghost appeared and said we needed to not age to be ready for the beast of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
It's superficially similar, but all the stuff that's interesting about it gone and pointless. So why even bother? Have them old English.
I have a worse problem with this scene, which is that Hellboy comes in, he sees the heads of the giants that they've hunted, and doesn't care. Unlike the comic where he's like, holy crap, look at these heads. Here he's like, oh, you've hunted giants. Kind of like he's so unaffected by it. In the comic, he's almost the audience surrogate. In the comic, he's like, Hellboy's in awe of these giant heads, and we are too as the audience. And here, there's no reaction to these things. There's no... So
and now we get some more terrible...
Here, this is hilarious. So Lady Hatton, who is the psychic, who's in the comic as well, uses a crystal ball which she has a crystal ball in the comic, but it's just a red ball, which is kind of a cool coloring effect. Here in the movie, it's an actual crystal ball where she shows Hellboy's origin, which he apparently has never heard any of this in 60 years. 60, 70 years. He never knew that he was summoned during World War II at this... He's never asked once in 60 years about who summoned me that night. We get the scene with Rasputin and all that kind of stuff.
Oh boy, this scene, it couldn't... Although on paper it's the same thing that happened in Hellboy 2004, it couldn't look more different.
Yeah.
And this is where you really see the difference between... Alright, I want to be fair on Neil Marshall here. I haven't seen his other films, but I hear he's a competent horror director.
Yeah, he is. He really is, yeah.
When you give an auteur his hand, like in 2004, you get something that looks fantastic.
Yeah.
When you don't...
Yeah.
When Neil Marshall was allegedly having a really tough time on set, creative control constantly being taken away with him, having to fight against various other creative figures, producers, maybe actors, maybe even Mignola himself, you end up with something that's so insipid.
I think it's worse than insipid. It's not just bland. Lobster Johnson is in the scene.
You're not just insipid, but ridiculous.
He's been brought in as a substitute, I guess, for Torch of Liberty. But why is he in this movie in the first place? This is not the pulp.
Because this
why do we have this one single pulp element, which had a place in the comics, and maybe would have had a place in Hellboy 2004, in the scene.
Yes.
He would have belonged in that scene in 2004.
And he would have looked cool, too.
He would have looked cool in this.
He doesn't look cool in this.
Thomas Haden Church, by the way, from Monkey Bone.
Yes,
in fact, this is his second appearance.
Well spotted.
He's going to have 3, by the way, maybe even 4 by the time we're done with him. But this is his second pop-up, but he's kind of in the Torch of Liberty role. But why? Why? We're trying to make this super gory horror movie, and somehow this guy
think he's in the Torch of Liberty role at all.
Yeah.
I think they've just dragged him in for it's like, look, it's... are you a fan of the comics? Look, it's Lobster Johnson.
Yeah. But what if you weren't a fan of the comics and you're coming in here? Why is this mass superhero in this movie?
Exactly. Exactly. So it's not just insipid. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You're quite right. Why is he there? He doesn't add anything.
Yeah.
He just looks silly.
Yeah.
So if you're a fan, you're going to be annoyed because he's silly, and if you're not a fan, you're going to be like, "What is this?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this a joke?
So meanwhile,
Lobster Man.
Yeah. So maybe this is we'll get to that point later. So, meanwhile, Grugok's going around trying to find the 5 pieces of Nimue. He goes to a monastery. There are a couple of scenes that are lit like Hellboy, much like the museum scene or the auction house scene in Hellboy 2, where it's like appropriately shadowed. And there are 1 or 2 scenes like that. This is one of them. He gets the piece, blah, blah, blah. He kills some... monks in a very gory way.
It's super gory. Too gory. It's taking me out of the film, it's so gory. And also, it's silly. Like, we've established that the boxes can only be opened by a man of God.
Yeah.
Grugok is like a fairy. He shouldn't even be allowed in a church. But in he is. Not only does he wander around in a church and kill a bunch of monks, but in order to open the box, the monks have sworn a vow of silence, incidentally. He tears the monk's tongue out, puts it in his own mouth, and he recites some sort of Latin prayer.
He's able to speak as that monk.
That's just so stupid.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of locking a box that can only be opened by a pious man.
Yeah, yeah.
But in that case, why not just leave it out? Because, Kumar, I think, because it's edgy.
It is. It is
It's so
love this
edgy.
awesome scene. He rips off this guy's face.
Grogok's gonna rip off a guy's face.
Yeah.
Oh, it just took me right out.
Okay, so
So he's he's not holy. How can he be holy?
Yeah.
He's already a fairy, and now he's stealing tongues and...
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Osiris Club is gearing up, and they're wearing Ghostbusters gear for this wild hunt, which was bizarre. I was like,
Well, it's the electric pike, so...
yeah, but that's hidden in the comic. You don't know they're going to electrify Hellboy with it. You don't know they're carrying that gear. It looks very Wicker Man kind of stuff. It looks like this ancient ritual in the comic. In this, it's so strange looking. Anyway, they go out. The treachery happens. They stab him in the back. It's in, as the line says in the comic, "No devil shall sit on the throne of England."
So again, they know his destiny. Oh, fine, in the film, I guess, because Hellboy's completely ignorant of his own origins.
Yes.
Incidentally, they're electrocuting him with their electric pikes while standing in shallow water with him.
Yeah. So now we cut back to Nimue. So Grogak has been so he's got her head and torso, which they seem to be sewn back together. Okay.
Yeah.
He's also got like one of her legs and one of her arms. They're not sewn on for some reason. They're left detached. Why? She's watching TV in a living room. It's a bit like the V for Vendetta scene where they're sitting on the couch watching TV, and I'm like, this is not the right for the tone of this. Why is she watching? And she's like looking at the crap on TV saying, this world has become decadent, I must destroy it kind of crap. I'm like, okay. And he offers her Jaffa cakes, and all this stuff is just like, you've lost
This
it.
was supposed to... Yeah,
This is
exactly.
supposed to be epic, mythic. This is supposed to
And
feel like
horror.
1,000 years ago.
Yeah, this was supposed to be like a horror movie.
Yeah. It's,
Or at least something dark and mature. And the guy with the Jeff... And so that I think it's the Deadpool influence.
yeah. Yes! Because they're sitting on the sofa
Just
making
like they are
jokes
in Deadpool.
in Deadpool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna die for this comparison. And you won't find it online. I didn't see it anywhere.
Yeah, well, also, yeah, I keep thinking of, like, Robert Eggers' The Witch. Like, this should be kind of, we should be going
Oh
in that
wow!
direction.
Imagine the Hellboy film like that.
Yeah.
That would be really something.
Okay, so Hellboy's been chopped up by he was left for dead, but then the giants showed up and killed the party, as in the comic. He wakes up, and then the giants are there, and he fights them. It's not a berserker rage. I mean, he does kill them all, but it's not like, he doesn't have any self-doubt about it. It's just an awesome thing that he does.
No, it's okay to kill the giants because they're big monsters.
Yes.
Where it wasn't okay to kill his vampirized friend
Yes.
because then he'd be a jerk.
Yeah.
Or... I hate it when films don't have the guts for their characters to kill unless it's in self-defense or something like that. Anyway, minor degree. Yeah, this action scene's not real great.
No.
There is
because it's CG fighting CG.
Yeah. It's very obvious when it goes from David Harbour.
Is he wearing a bodysuit? Surely his biceps aren't that big. He's massive.
I wasn't able to find hard data like I was for Ron Perlman, but apparently he got in shape for this role as much as he was
But he's
able.
world-class bodybuilder size, and he's not a 20-year-old man.
Oh, I'm sure he's in. Yeah. There's.
Extraction was
there's
2 years
stuff.
ago, and he looks like a normal-sized man in that.
Oh yeah, it's a suit.
It's a suit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
He's not just been painted red. It's
No,
very
no.
clearly a lot of
A muscle suit.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Okay.
But then Perlman was wearing one too,
Yes.
but just not as bulky, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay, so he's beat up.
David Harbour's makeup does look pretty rad.
It does look really good. I do agree. In fact, his face looks really craggy in a way that looks like the Duncan Fegredo drawings.
Yeah, it
of
does
his
look like
face.
Duncan Fegredo. Yeah, you're right.
So
Whereas Perlman probably looks more like the Mignola.
you might be right about that.
Just very, very primary colour.
Yeah.
Kind of very smooth.
Yes, and except he had those kind of arcane
They were-
eldritch designs on him. That version.
Oh yeah.
The Perlman version?
Yes.
Okay, so he's kind of knocked out by so he's woken up to fight the giants, then he's been knocked out again. So he's knocked out again. This time
Can't think how to get from one scene to the next. We'll knock out the
will
character.
knock him out. Alice shows up in a van, She says 4 guys, I think she says. I don't know who this guy. She picks him up, takes her
Yeah, there's
back
guys. We
to-
never see those guys again.
No, we never see them in the first place. The van just pulls up, and then next scene, Hellboy wakes up in her flat.
Yeah.
We're not in a cottage in the woods here. We're in
How did they
in
get
the
to the
city flats in London,
point.
which is really urban and not like the tone of this particular run of comics, which is not urban at all.
It's because Alice's character has changed.
Yes.
First of all, she's not. Is she Irish?
Yeah, she's half Irish or something.
Terrible accent. Like, another American
right.
actor playing...
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
She's in some episodes of Loki, by the way. That's the only thing. Didn't know that.
Is she any good in it?
I don't know. I've
She's
never seen that
awful
show.
in this.
Yeah, she's really bad.
Really wooden.
Really bad.
And she's been changed to...
She's psychic, which is what they added psychic powers to Abe in the Del Toro Hellboy. So now she's been given all these psychic powers.
She's a medium.
She's a medium. She's able
Which she's
to
not
talk
in
to
the comics,
spirits of
you're
the
right.
dead. Yeah.
She
In the
needs
comics, she can speak to fairies. That's about it.
she's just having mystic visions like everybody in
Right.
the comic. Everybody's constantly having visions.
Yeah.
So it's fine. It's no big
And
deal.
okay, so now Daddy Broom shows back up with Daniel Dae Kim, who works for M11. He's not part of the BPRD for some reason. He's like
Why?
British.
Why make him British? Why?
Don't know.
Daniel Dae Kim cannot do a British accent. He sounds ridiculous. He sounds like Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah.
It's so bad. And as
Yeah.
you say, he can act.
Yeah, really good actor. So yeah, he's like a special forces guy basically. We don't know that he's got any powers or anything at this stage. Now we get Alice's backstory, and it plays out a little bit like the comic in that she was substituted by the fairies, but in this, I guess Grugak wanted to be human. In the
Yeah.
comic, he's like didn't know quite why he did it. It's just like fairy stuff.
Yeah.
He got replaced. He wasn't sure what was going on.
Yeah, you're right.
Here he's like, I want to be human. Hellboy kind of touches him with the horseshoe,
Yep.
as he does in the comic, and he transforms, and then he basically runs away, and Hellboy threatens him. He's like, bring back that baby. And he brings back the baby.
Yeah.
The baby's left on the doorstep.
have to do the
he doesn't
corpse.
have to go through that mission with the corpse on his back and all that kind of stuff, which of course they couldn't do because it was done in Hellboy 1 in 2004.
That's right.
So they couldn't really go back to that. So they were stuck having this non-story.
Well, I mean, it did plenty of other stuff that they did in Hellboy.
But, yeah, so this is enough
again.
to...
Why is this? Why is this here?
Well, Grogak needs revenge. This is his reason for resurrecting
But why is this
Nimue.
sequence here? It's about 5 to 8 minutes long.
Yeah.
We see like Alice is a baby. We see this scene where Hellboy has like a fight. He's like wrestling with the baby Grogak.
Yeah.
He's trying to escape up the chimney. He's grabbing him with tongs. The parents are running around haplessly.
Yeah.
And then Hellboy says, "You better bring him back, or there's going to be trouble." He yells it. David Harbour is very yelly. He's kind of yell boy.
I'm gonna get to that soon, a couple of scenes down the line.
No
here.
worries. And then, they're sitting around just waiting. I think Hellboy is drinking or sleeping or something. And then there's a knock at the door and the baby's there, and then we see Grogak sort of climbing away.
Yeah.
And this whole scene didn't need to be there.
Yeah, probably not.
And it's only there because it's something that was in the comic.
So we're shortly gonna get to a scene where Hellboy. BPRD has set up a base in London, and Hellboy gets into an argument. So Nimue has appeared to Hellboy.
Right.
And said, you should not be working with humans, you should be working with us. And Hellboy's like, this has put a seed into his head. He's thinking. And he gets a huge argument with Ian McShane about how, why did you rescue me? He's finally learned that he was sent to kill him in World War II. And he's like, you were sent to kill me, why didn't you kill me? Why am I killing my own people? I should be fighting humans. And he storms out of there. He screams real loud. He gets to an elevator. For some reason, the elevator, like in Angel Heart, ends up going down to hell, and he meets Baba Yaga.
Yeah.
And
also, how old is Hellboy?
Okay, this is the point I'm getting to. So every character he has met, Baba Yaga, we hear about all his adventures. We hear about how every character he meets, he's like, oh yeah, we met back in 65, or he knew all those Irish Club people. He knows Baba Yaga. Oh, I took out your eye. This is all part of it. It's all about Alice. I saved you when you were a baby. All this stuff. So he's been through all this stuff. As you said, he acts like a frat boy. He acts like he's 17, 18 years old. He's having these arguments with his father, but he's had 60 years of adventures.
Yep.
So why hasn't his brain matured in those 60 years? It does not add up.
Yep.
They're trying to mash together the Wild Hunt era Hellboy with this kid version of Hellboy that would be arguing with his father, and it does not make sense for him to be acting like that after 60 years of adventures.
Also, and his... So how old is Professor Broom? How old is Broom now?
Broom has stopped aging too for some reason. They tell us that.
But Hellboy never noticed. So Hellboy's like almost 70 years old.
And he never noticed that his father wasn't aging, or
So We don't even get a line like we do in 04, where someone literally says, "He don't age like we do. He's barely."
Right. He ages in reverse dog years.
Great fun line.
Yeah.
Think reverse dog years. He's barely out of his 20s.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Fine. And this is,
Why don't we get that line?
they don't know what Hellboy's character is.
Yeah.
You know, they say they don't know what kind of film they're making.
Yeah.
You know, well, you read stuff where like Mignola says things like, "Well, we can't tell Hellboy's origin because Del Toro already did it. So this one we're gonna look at something different." But we do get his origin.
We do get his origin. Yeah.
Or you know, we're gonna have a more mature Hellboy, but he's not.
Again, I feel like they're just leaning into the boy in the title for some reason, as if that's relevant. I mean, it's a weird name that Mignola probably regrets having given him in the first place.
Maybe, but I've always thought I've always loved the incongruity of it.
Yes.
That he's clearly not a boy.
Yeah.
But he has this funny, it's like old boy or,
Yeah.
you know, it's something like, you know, like a funny diminutive name, but he's a 6 foot tall demon.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. In this though, you're right, maybe it's partly they're leaning into it, but also they want him to be an edgy guy.
Yeah, absolutely, that's it. And it doesn't make sense for the amount of life experience he has, which is a lot. And he should know all these things about himself. He should have wondered why Ian McShane wasn't
Why weren't you
120
aging?
years old at this stage.
He doesn't care. So he's
Bizarre.
like, "Dad, I hate you."
So he has a fight. He has a fist fight with Baba Yaga. It's a very J-horror kind of thing. Again, she looks really great.
Does look
Wish she
J-horror,
was in a different movie. He offers her his eye and then reneges on the deal, which was a bummer to me because in the comic he did give her his eye as part of the deal. And I was like, why couldn't you do that?
Why
But
not
I was
just-
also worried at the same time that they were going to do it and it would be super gory, which is not in the comic. She just appears with the eyeball in her hand in the next page. So maybe there was no good way out for this scene. I don't know.
It's just another case of so much stuff just lifted. I don't really get what they were going. There's so much stuff that's just lifted straight from the comics and not explored properly.
Yes, this is. I also don't understand why they've got a framework for a story here, and they've put a lot of elements into it, and somehow it's not holding together.
No, the script just doesn't. There's no. We don't really get why we're going from scene to scene. Instead of having 10 different Hellboy characters, they needed like 3 and to kind of really explore them. Like you said, this film, if Baba Yaga was the antagonist, tell the same story, but instead of Nimue, I guess I'd just have to live without Milla Jovovich in a sheer robe.
Yeah.
But just make her the bad guy.
Yeah.
Baba Yaga the bad guy, and then you would have had a way creepier, more interesting film.
Yeah.
Instead, Baba Yaga shows up for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe a little longer.
Yeah.
And her appearance doesn't, except to deliver a bunch of expository dialogue again.
Does she reveal where Nimue is?
That's
maybe?
it.
Okay.
That was it. Hellboy has to trade his eye for the information where Nimue is.
Okay.
And that's all that scene...
But Baba Yaga's the one that brought him down there in that magic elevator.
Yeah.
Hellboy didn't find her.
No. There's no reason why he would end up in that
There's
place.
no reason for him to bring her, to tell Hellboy where Nimue is in the first place.
That's right.
Why bring him into that situation?
Don't ask questions, just point and look, it's that thing from the comic I recognise.
So they take a plane out there. I think this is where we get a bit of a flashback of Ben Daimyo's background, where he was a special forces guy that fought a tiger in a forest.
It's a jaguar. Another completely pointless digression that's not explored and goes nowhere, and is just because in the comics Daimyo is possessed by a jaguar spirit.
Yes.
And it's revealed in the BPRD comics. It's revealed over many issues, and he also has this incredibly disfiguring scar that shows most of his teeth.
Yeah.
He's a great character in the comics.
Yeah.
And this is just Daniel Dae Kim's terrible British accent, and he's a jerk to Hellboy for no reason.
Yes.
And we get a 2-minute sequence of him in a jungle
being attacked by
a jaguar that we never see.
Yeah.
Why?
So now we get this fight in a forest. It's very dark, very hard to follow what's going on. I watched this on Netflix and it was like, this wasn't a bad download. This was like the Netflix version. I couldn't tell what was going on all this scene. But in this, so they end up fighting Nimue. I believe it's in this scene. And she injures Alice.
Kind of like how the Duke of Gloucester injured Alice.
Yes. So she needs to be healed. So one of the witches... Now, the witches in this are all young women, I think. And in the comic, they're all really old crones.
Yes. You do the math, audience.
So they've done some reversals here. I don't know. In the comic, it's kind of cool. There's a contrast between the youth of Nimue and the age of the Crones.
Yes.
And also Nimue...
But nobody wants to see that.
No. And Nimue has this thing where she, like, makes them, like, their bones, like,
She gives
go
them
into
instant
arthritis. And,
J-horror, yeah.
J-horror arthritis. And we get a similar... She does that move here, too, which was kind of good, but it goes on really long. Like, very long. Anyway, so... they have to rescue Alice, so one of the young witches, they're like from the craft. She's like, hey, you can go to Merlin and he'll save her. So they go to this cave, and Merlin's in the cave.
Nimue wants them to go to Merlin.
Okay.
Okay, because Nimue...
Oh, right.
Because Nimue wants Hellboy to take up Excalibur.
Yes.
Because this is spoilers, like we care. In this, Excalibur makes Hellboy into an evil demon.
Yes.
For no reason, again.
Well...
So in the comic...
I'd say it's even worse in this, but we'll get to it.
Astaroth wants Hellboy to take up Excalibur and fight the Ogdru Jahad because he sees that as the first step on him summoning the demonic army as well, and then being compelled to go to Hell and complete his demonic his infernal destiny by overthrowing Satan.
Yes.
That's why Astaroth kind of revives Nimue to begin with, to set Hellboy on that path.
Yes.
Here in this film, there is no reason why Excalibur, an ostensibly holy object, right? I mean, certainly like a magical object on the side of the light, definitely not on the side of darkness, turns him into an evil demon that's going to overthrow humanity.
Okay, I will say, if I can play Hellboy's advocate...
Very good.
In the comic, when he touches Excalibur, he has a vision of himself in hell with full horns, riding a dragon, a fire-breathing dragon, and leading the hordes of hell. He has a vision of that.
Yes.
And in the movie, they do the same thing. Merlin shows him... Merlin's playing the Morgan Le Fay role in this movie. He's like, take up Excalibur.
Yeah.
He touches Excalibur. He has that vision of himself in hell.
Agreed, but it's stricken of context. In the comic, the context is that picking up Excalibur will be the first step on the way to that destiny. In the film...
They keep talking about a sword. There's like 3 different swords in the comic. They keep mentioning different swords.
Yeah.
And the Osiris Club was like, well, what about there were all those swords?
It was a bit much.
Yeah.
So, I get that they've tried to simplify it, but by simplifying it, it just becomes nonsensical.
No. In fact, at the end of the movie, jumping way ahead, when he pulls Excalibur out of the stone, for some reason, that unleashes demons from hell onto the earth.
Yeah, why?
Why?
Yeah. It doesn't make sense. It turns him into an uber demon. It takes over his brain.
I don't think that's what Excalibur does.
No, I'm pretty sure you don't pull Excalibur out of the stone and then demons appear.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it does the opposite, if anything.
Yeah.
It's so infuriating.
Okay, so Merlin heals her. Yeah.
So Merlin again delivers a whole bunch of exposition.
Yeah,
Again,
he cuts Hellboy's hand to draw some blood for some reason. What was that for?
because he has the blood of Arthur in him.
But what does that do? What does having
I guess
his
we
blood?
won't get that unless there's blood on the screen.
Oh.
This film is constantly treating us like
so it
idiots.
looks like we're supposed to see that looks like Arthur's blood. I don't know. Okay, yeah. So much like Morgan, he's the one that
But also,
informs him that
unlike Morgan, he's been dead.
Yes.
Why would he know all this?
No, he's been alive in that tomb. Yeah, you're right.
but he's just been in the tomb.
Yeah.
Why would he know all this stuff?
Yeah. So, finally, Hellboy confronts...
But we've got a bit where Merlin collapses after using all of his power to bring Excalibur to their location, and Hellboy refuses to take it up because he sees that he'll become a demon if he touches it, and demons will appear. And Merlin's like, "Oh, you idiot, I used up all my power," blah, and then he dies. And then they walk out of the cave, and then Daimyo and Lisa or whatever. Liz are there. Alice. Lisa, Alice, God. Alice are there. And then Daimyo gets a text or an alert on his phone.
Right.
Looks at his phone and says, "Oh shit, the BPRD's been invaded by Nimue."
Right.
I want to know what kind of alert he got on his phone that summed that up.
Right. Yes, I forgot. Yes, the Osiris Club was wiped out too because they had one of the pieces of Nimue, so they were all gored. They were all ripped to pieces. There was a scene there. We didn't mention that Alice's way of one of the ways she makes ghosts talk is they form out of her mouth like this gross thing.
Yep.
Like the torso will look like a humanoid ghost thing, but the bottom half will look like this weird, if you remember the worm creature from Poltergeist 2, it's really gross. It's absolutely disgusting.
Again, and it's not at all like the comics, because in the comics it's always ectoplasm, like wispy, bright
No, and I would say at the end, because, spoiler, Broom gets killed.
Oh, I want to talk about this.
And she gets to she summons up his spirit so that he can speak to Hellboy again, and we get what's supposed to be a moving speech, but it's disgusting. Because he looks like intestines.
Yeah. I want to talk about this. I might as well talk about this now.
Sure. Because so the BPRD was invaded. Yeah. Everybody was killed. Much like there's Ice Club, they're all ripped into pieces. People are ripped up into two halves, and they're all over the place. It's so gross. And I like gross movies. I'm a fan of the Evil Dead movies. Okay, but it's not my problem. Is the grossness of it? It's the grossness of it in what should be a PG-13 Hellboy movie. Yeah. It's just so out of place. Yeah. It doesn't...
It is out of place, because if Marshall's to be believed, they just whacked it all in post.
Yeah. I mean, I watch Lucio Fulci zombie movies. You know what I'm talking about? I go for this stuff. But then the
grossness is the point. But here
exactly.
It's not the point here. It's just stuff that they've...
It's edgelord.
It's just look how edgy our film is. Yeah. It's water cooler moment. Like, do they imagine people will be gathered around the water cooler the next day?
Oh yeah.
Oh man, did you see?
Awesome.
Oh, did you see Hellboy? There was demons pulling people apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Anyway, I absolutely want to return to Professor Broom at the end, but why don't we wait till we reach that organically?
So Nimoy has torn apart the BPRD. They find her in a church. I can't remember how. I think she calls Hellboy or something. Doesn't he get a phone call or something? Anyway, they go to the church.
They find her in the church.
I don't remember.
I don't
remember how they get from
maybe
scene to
Daimyo got another text.
Maybe. They go to the church. He has to fight her. She's unleashed a plague. This is her thing. Is she unleashes plagues? She did this in the past. She does it again.
But it's not just. She's not really unleashing a. Oh well, she has unleashed a plague, and it's going to destroy the world. It's like COVID, but up 10 times 1,000.
Yeah.
But she's not. She's just sort of striding through the streets of London in broad daylight, pointing at people.
Hellboy was too earlier in the movie.
Oh yeah.
Even though he's supposed to be.
It's more that we see Nimue making her way to St. Paul's Cathedral.
Yes.
With Grugak, and people are running away from them, and Grugak is saying, "Oh yeah, run, you fucking idiots!"
Yeah.
And Nimue's pointing at them, and they're melting onto the sidewalk with some very gory kind of effects.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. It's just there so that we can see some people melting.
Yes.
Anyway, as you say, they go to St. Paul's.
Yeah.
Grugak appears. He's now been restored to but he's still a pig monster.
But he's giant.
He's giant now.
Yeah.
He and Hellboy have a big rumble.
Hellboy kills him.
No, Nimue kills him.
Oh yeah, he shrinks. He shrinks back.
Daimyo turns into a jaguar.
Yeah, he's a jaguar, were-jaguar.
Yep.
Now, earlier in the movie, he was taking drugs. He was injecting himself to keep this from happening.
Yep.
Now he decides not to inject himself, and he turns.
Yep.
But he's perfectly conscious. He fights by Hellboy's side, so he's not attacking Alice. He's not attacking indiscriminately. He's in charge of himself.
So why
be ashamed of the fact that you turn into this thing, or prevent yourself from turning into it when it can be useful?
At the end of the film as well, Hellboy punches him in the face to make him into the jaguar.
like Liz had to be slapped to turn on fire in Hellboy 1.
Yep.
Why? So what? How does this work? Does it? It's not just whenever you want to turn, you have to be under stress or something?
Yes,
or...
but why would he try to prevent the change from occurring? Especially since they were in dangerous situations when he was turning.
Yes.
And he would be like, oh shit, I need to get out my medicine and inject myself, or I'll turn into a were-jaguar.
That will help the situation.
Just more... the writing in this film is so bad.
Yeah.
Alright, so
And by the way, those effects, I mean, when you see the heels growing, they're ripped off of American Werewolf, but done in CG, which is American Werewolf in Paris, which is the worst. So it's like a rip-off of American Werewolf in Paris. Imagine that. How bad can you get?
Yeah, and this is another thing, even though this film is 10 years after Golden Army, the CG looks worse.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Yeah. So Hellboy falls into...
this is really annoying.
He falls into a pit, and Arthur's tomb is down there.
Okay, I want to talk about this. So, Nimue So, Grugak and Hellboy have a big fight. Grugak kicks Hellboy's ass and Daimyo's ass.
Yeah.
And then he's just about to crush his head with I think a baptismal font or something. And Nimue comes out of the shadows and says, "No, don't." And he's like, "What? Oh, what are you talking about, my queen? You said I would be allowed to kill him." And she's like, "No, you were just allowed to beat him up till he was almost dead, and then she kills him." What's been achieved by beating Hellboy up?
Yeah, no.
Anything? Like, she says you just needed to get him to the edge. The edge of what? Will he be more likely to accept Excalibur if he's just been recently beaten up?
Maybe.
It's implied, but I don't think it follows naturally.
No.
Anyway, then Hellboy sasses her, I guess. She picks him up with her power and bangs him down on the ground.
Yeah.
And then, less than a foot under the surface of St. Paul's Cathedral is Arthur's tomb in a large cavernous space.
That nobody's ever found before.
And
Excalibur's in
and Nimue even says, like, don't say it, but she actually says, everyone's been looking for Arthur's tomb all this time, and it was here all along. And no, it wasn't.
Yeah.
St. Paul's Cathedral was built in like the 17th. Well, the site of St. Paul's Cathedral has been a church for like many hundreds of years, but it famously burnt down in the Great Fire of London and then was rebuilt by Sir Christopher Wren, the architect, in the late 16th, early 18th centuries. I guarantee they would have found Arthur's tomb because they would have laid the stone.
Yeah.
Because there's only the layer of man-made stone between the floor of the church and the tomb of Arthur. It's a little thing, but it just really kind of takes me out of the movie.
Yeah.
She wants him to take up Excalibur.
He does.
Well, he refuses first, and then she gestures, and Broom appears. Where was he all this time?
Okay.
He was obviously within gesturing distance. She uses her power to yank him towards her.
Yeah.
He must have been sitting in plain sight in the church, but I guess they were busy fighting Grugak and they didn't have time to go over and talk to him. She kills him. He becomes infuriated. He takes up the sword. Then he's brainwashed, would you say? He's sort of the power of the sword.
She slashes his throat. Oh no, Hellboy.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're talking about Hellboy being brainwashed.
Yeah. Well, Broom says some swear words.
Yeah.
You know, and then he dies. Hellboy gets really upset, and that's what makes him take up.
Yeah.
Again, it's very similar to Hellboy 1, where Rasputin kills.
Yeah. Liz.
This is another great sin of this film, which is that it doesn't really do anything original either. Yeah. For a reboot, so many things happen in it that happened in Golden Army and Hellboy 1. Yeah. Even the theme, well, you'd be generous calling it a theme, but Hellboy's kind of like character struggle would be, I guess, am I man or am I monster? That was in Hellboy 1.
I would also say humans versus the monster world. Two armies against each other is what Golden Army was also about.
Exactly. And who are you? Are you the thing you're born to be, or are you the thing you're made? It doesn't do anything new, so why... infuriating. Anyway, he takes up the sword, This
causes these demons to arise.
Yes.
Now, this does happen in the comic. When the apocalypse starts, they say, like, all these giant monsters are going to go up, these demons are going to appear. Okay, so these things, now we get some killing of humans, like, really gory. Some of them are, like, skinned. It's really full on. I will say these alien designs looked a lot, the monster designs look a lot like the angels from Evangelion, which may have been partly based on angel descriptions from the Bible, a little bit, I don't know. But
maybe. But they're pretty creepy, but they're just doing really silly things.
Yeah.
Like skinning people, ripping heads off. You see two demons kind of, and it's just really, really gratuitous.
Yeah.
And unpleasant.
Yeah. So somehow they've appeared because Excalibur has been pulled out of the stone.
It's a lesser known effect of taking up Excalibur.
Yeah, and then somehow Hellboy kills Nimue.
Well, first off, we have the scene that you mentioned earlier.
Oh, yes.
He's about... Nimue, incidentally, has the hots for Hellboy, big time. Like, she's really into Hellboy.
Okay.
She wants him to be her demonic consort.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's quite submissive to him, actually. She even kneels before him as he's the king, you know, he's going to be the king of this new world.
Okay.
This new world of monsters out in the open. And Hellboy's into it, I guess. He's kind of just got a 1,000-yard stare because he's become a demon, and they've actually changed his makeup somewhat. They've made his face more demonic.
Right.
His eyes are brighter yellow, and of course he has the big horns and the flaming crown straight out the comics. Then Alice hits on the one way we're going to fix this situation, I guess. Again, this is just like Hellboy 2004, except instead of Myers throwing Hellboy his father's crucifix, Alice jumps down into the pit and summons Hellboy's dad's ghost in a gross intestine monster.
Yeah.
And it's so lame. There's a term, you'll be familiar with this term, bathos.
Yes.
Something is pathetic when you're trying
to be moving.
You're trying to be moving, but...
And you fail. You fall on your face.
Instead, it's anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Because of something silly or tone deaf.
Yeah.
And this is the perfect example of a moment of bathos in a film that I've ever seen. This is such an anticlimax because Ian McShane as Broom is trying to deliver all this meaningful speech, and first of all, he's naked.
Yeah.
Second of all, his lower half is an undulating intestine
Coming out of Alice's mouth.
coming out of Alice's mouth, and it just looks so silly.
Yeah.
And plus, also, he's swearing a lot, again, still. And everything they're trying to do to have this big, climactic, profound moment has just had all the lives and gravitas sucked out of it by this ludicrous imagery.
Yeah.
Bathos.
Yeah. So then he kills her. Oh yeah, he chops off her head.
Yep.
And he drops it into
Hell,
which is, I guess, has opened up under the church, like it's just right there, I guess.
Of all the places, I mean, St. Paul's Cathedral...
I guess hell opened because he pulled out Excalibur, is that what's happened? He's opened actual access to hell, so he can just drop her head down there?
Yes, he does. We get, I guess, a sequel hook. She's yelling stuff about how they'll meet again at the final battle. What, this wasn't the final battle?
Right.
What's the final battle, if not this?
Well, to be fair, this is not the final battle in the comic either. There's a bigger final battle.
with Hellboy in Hell. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and the stuff that comes after, because then there's the full Audrey Jahad stuff coming after Hellboy in Hell.
Oh, wow. I really need to... It's been a while since I read some Hellboy. And then I guess we get no fewer than two sequel hooks.
Yes.
First, we have a pre-credit sequence where Hellboy's wearing a BPRD t-shirt.
Very long sequence.
Alice is...
She's in the BPRD, and Daimyo is in the BPRD.
Yep.
And they're, like, investigating some Russian facility, and they have a big fight. Another big fight. I was like, we've had a lot of fights. We don't need to have this. You can just go in the facility. Yep. They find a capsule in
Plenty
there.
of extrajudicial murder occurring, and they find Abe Sapien's...
Yeah. Capsule
tank.
Yeah.
Abe's hand appears Titanic style.
Yes.
On the side, and then roll credits.
Yeah, so Abe's hand appears. Who's this for?
Yeah.
So, who knows whose hand this is? People that have seen the previous movies, people that have read the comics. This movie's not for them.
It's not for either of those groups.
Is it for people who've never heard of Hellboy before? What are they going to make of this fish hand?
And if you're a fan of the comics or the previous movies... You know, why reboot it then?
Yeah.
You know, what are you going to make of it?
Yeah.
I even read that Abe was going to have a completely different characterization if he appeared in the sequels. According to a makeup artist, quoted I think on the Wikipedia page, he was going to be a thug.
Whoa.
So if you wanted to see...
That would have been perfect fit for this movie, because they're all thugs.
Then we get another sequence where Hellboy is at his father's grave drinking, and then the ghost of Lobster Johnson appears. Yeah. And then Lobster Johnson spouts off a bunch of nonsense about it's just the first battle of the war and he's got to shape off, and then he walks off, and meanwhile Hellboy is yelling all this, again, frat.
He's like, I love you, man!
I love you, Lobster Johnson!
Which is not what we never got any of that in the previous 2 hours of this movie. Of him being obsessed with Lobster Johnson, or even having heard of Lobster Johnson before that flashback that was given to him by Lady Hatton.
Yeah.
Did he know who Lobster Johnson was?
Good point. I mean, in the comics,
do we know that he's a comic book character? Do we know that he's a pulp magazine or radio serial character? No, we don't know anything about him.
No, he's just a nonsense character that pops in from nowhere and then walks through Hellboy and leaves.
Yeah, and Hellboy's like shocked that he's been watching.
Yeah, again, Hellboy's been seeing ghosts and monsters for 70 years, but he's super freaked out that Lobster Johnson can walk through him. And it's so funny, he's like fanboying out, and Lobster Johnson's like, you want to see the claw, don't you? Like, Lobster Johnson's famous and is used to people. I thought he was like an undercover... none of it makes a lick of sense. No. And then, credits, whatever.
Yeah.
Fine. Alright, trivia time.
Okay.
This movie sucked. Did bad.
Okay.
$50 million budget. Box office, 55.1 million. Did not do well.
Yeah.
Very definitely considered a flop. That probably doesn't include marketing, that figure. Lost money. Speaking of Daniel Dae Kim, he was not originally cast as Ben Daimyo.
Okay.
Originally, it was Ed Skrein was cast, and interestingly, he plays Ajax in Deadpool.
Ah, okay.
Or Francis, as Deadpool calls him.
Yes.
So another connection with Deadpool there.
Okay.
However, there was a backlash to his casting.
Of course.
Because he's not a person of color. He's not of Asian
Why
heritage.
would they even think that why would they think to cast him in the first place?
Because of the Deadpool connection.
Yeah, right.
But also because casting white actors in roles for characters that were... It just happens all the time. We're going to do Ghost of the Shell at some point.
Yeah.
Doug Jones was offered a cameo.
Okay.
He turned it down. I wonder why. The official reason is that he was committed to Star Trek Discovery at the time, but I wonder if he just didn't want a bar of it. Yeah, well, I can talk a little bit about the production.
Okay.
As I said earlier, Mike Mignola helped write the screenplay. He seems to have been initially
He
thrilled.
doesn't have a credit.
No, only Andrew Cosby is credited, but this screenplay went through a shitload of drafts.
Okay.
Lots of people worked on it.
Okay.
Including, allegedly, this is scuttlebutt, Harbour and McShane contributed rewrites. Now, this is pure, like, muckraking, but we'll get to that. So, this was like a crap script. Okay. So, they were constantly... You can see, like, you're watching it, nothing flows like it should. Every characters are popping up all the time, but Andrew Cosby gets the sole credit for it. But lots of people were wrestling with this, trying to get it into some kind of shape all through production, right through to post-production. Like, you can see it's been hacked apart in editing.
Yeah.
It's just a big, big mess. So as we discussed last week, everyone trying to make Hellboy 3 for ages, but, it just didn't happen. Del Toro and Perlman pulled out. It became a reboot. Neil Marshall signed on because he thought this was going to be a horror. Like, someone said, do you want to shoot Hellboy as a horror film? And he said, yeah. It was the biggest film he'd ever worked on at the time. So with the largest budget, but it turned out to be very bad. Now there's an interview with him online, and I can read from the transcript. He said, quote, "It was the worst professional experience of my life. The script was shit. The decision to make the film was a mistake. I signed up to it because they pitched this idea of we want to do the horror version of Hellboy. We want to bring you in and make it a really darker horror version. And then I quickly found out that A, the script was terrible, and B, it was never going to get better before we shot it despite many attempts. You cannot polish a turd, no matter how much you try. And I would go on to have all creative control taken away from me to extreme levels. There's nothing of me in that movie. The worst part is what they did in post. They added all this bad CGI gore, and that is not my hand at all."
Right.
So, this might be him distancing himself from what turned out to be a bad film, but I think there's probably a grain of truth in it. Also, because there was reporting shortly before the film was released in 2019 that was published in The Wrap online about the troubled production. So, people that had worked on the film spoke to a reporter for this website, The Wrap, said that it all started... First, it kicked off when the producers sacked Marshall's preferred cinematographer and brought in someone they knew, allegedly to show him who was boss. Another thing about this film is, which is something that you will recognise from Star Trek Picard and similar things, is that it has 16 producers.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know the expression, too many cooks spoil the broth?
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently the biggest problem was two of the producers, Lawrence Gordon and Lloyd Levin.
Okay.
Both of whom worked on the first two films.
Yeah.
But apparently in this film, I don't know, they had wanted a bigger role, maybe?
Okay.
And they weren't giving Marshall the reins, like Del Toro had, allegedly, according to this article. On set, apparently, Lloyd Levin would interrupt Marshall when he was trying to give direction to the actors, and even give different directions to them. Baffling. The actors started disrespecting Neil Marshall, allegedly, including David Harbour apparently walking off set.
Whoa.
When Marshall asked for more takes.
Okay.
If he's being undermined by the producers, I can understand why you might have that kind of attitude.
Brutal.
As I said, it summed up, there was this thing, this article repeats an anecdote about the tree. Do you know the tree that Nimue cuts to get her blood back from it?
Yes.
Another thing doesn't mean anything, doesn't go anywhere.
That's how she gets her full power back.
Yes. Neil Marshall wanted that tree to be asymmetrical and creepy looking. Lloyd Levin wanted it to be symmetrical. And apparently they squabbled over it all the way through filming.
Why would a tree be symmetrical?
Why? Eh?
Oh, I guess because that would be it. A supernatural tree would be symmetrical.
I couldn't say.
Thinking.
But then, so Marshall apparently lost that fight and the tree became symmetrical. But then in post, they changed it back to asymmetrical again.
Bizarre.
So there's just this toing and froing, tug of war, just like a really messy kind of production.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, rewrites going on constantly.
Yeah.
Including, so the anonymous reporting goes, David Harbour and Ian McShane insisting on rewrites of their dialogue. And, there's a lot of he said, she said in this article, but even in the denials, the spokesman for the producers are kind of tacitly admitting that this was going on. Because they'll say things like, we didn't overrule Marshall, but also we never told him he'd have the final cut.
Right.
Or, McShane and Harbour didn't rewrite the dialogue, but if if they did, that's normal practice. This is really... It sounds like a big, big mess.
Yeah.
A big mess.
Yeah. It's all there on screen, that's for sure.
It was nominated for 5 Golden Raspberries.
Wow. Really?
Didn't win any.
Wait, do you have the categories there?
Worst Director.
Okay.
Worst Actor for
Wow.
David Harbour, which I think is a bit unfair because he's really kind of given it his all. Worst Screenplay, that's a fair one.
Yeah.
Worst Prequel, Remake, Rip-Off or Sequel.
Ah, yes.
And a category I haven't heard of before, Worst Reckless Disregard for Human Life and Public Property.
Sometimes they make up categories like that.
Really good. Really good. Alright, that's pretty much all I have for trivia. Shall we do our voting?
Yeah, okay, so these comics, these are a yay for me. As we mentioned, it's not like the adventure comics, the Hellboy adventures, simple adventures in spooky castles and stuff, but for a storyline that was inevitable, I think they're pretty great, and the Fegredo art is just phenomenal.
I expressed a lot of reservations earlier, as you know, but I will still vote yay because it's still Hellboy, and it's still great. And especially for Hellboy in Mexico, which I think is an absolutely fantastic one-shot.
Yeah, it really is.
Really loved it.
Yep. What's next? Oh, the movie.
Next is the movie. Okay, Kumar, the movie.
Hard A. And it really... trying to understand why, but that we'll get to that in the adaptation section. But yeah, it was such a bummer, and it just seemed really obvious. Like all its choices were obvious. I don't know if that makes sense, but it just seemed very clear to me that they're trying to be Deadpool. Like you said, I wouldn't have made that connection watching it yesterday, but now it's very clear to me that they were trying to make a Deadpool movie, or they thought that the Hellboy comics were childish and they wanted to do something cooler.
Yeah, that's possible too. Yeah, there aren't Hellboy. The worst swear word Hellboy says is crap.
Yeah, or damn, or something like that.
Yeah.
And certainly other characters like Broom. Alice is so sweet in the comics. And Broom is this lovely old man.
Why make them these jaded, crass
Yeah.
character? It's not art just because people are swearing. It's not grown up because people are swearing or because they're jerks or because they're street or whatever.
Yeah.
That's not what makes something interesting.
Yeah.
And cool.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. It's a shame.
Yeah.
Adaptation, Kumar.
A hard nay. They really missed the tone, the character, all those things that you like in Hellboy are not there somehow. And they keep... It really makes me worried for the next one because they're saying that one's going to be a horror movie too. And it's really like a real no-name director, no-name actor. It's like, this is going to be a low budget. It's got to be direct-to-video or something. How is this ever going to get released? I have serious doubts about it. But this had a serious crew, amazing actors. When I saw Ian McShane was in it, I was like, it's going to get better, right? Like, he can't be that bad. And it just was bad. It was... Did they read the Hellboy comics? I think they read them and hated them.
Such a shame. I'm also nay. And in lieu of an answer, I'm going to read from a Hellboy comic.
Okay.
Okay. So this is from the Varkalak, which appeared in the collection The Right Hand of Doom.
Okay.
Which
it's an early one, I think.
It absolutely is an early one. I think it's volume 3.
Okay.
But it was the very first Hellboy comic collection I ever read.
Okay.
The original comic itself, The Varkalak, was published, I think, in 1999.
Okay.
As a kind of in a newspaper strip style. And in it, Hellboy is just kind of silently hunting a vampire. He pulls off the lid of the sarcophagus, the coffin, and then all hell breaks loose. You know, like he falls through the floor, monsters appear, they're all yelling at him. And then the vampire that he's come to slay, the Countess, I think she might even be Countess Bathory or something, like the Countess of Blood, like from Rotting.
Yeah.
She tells everyone to be quiet because the Varkalak is coming. And the Varkalak is the god of vampires. As big as... He fills the sky. He's so large, he eats the moon. That is the size of his power. He blots out the moon. He's so enormous. He is the king of all my kind, all vampire, living and dead, Moroi and Strigoi. And she says to Hellboy, and what are you to him? Cousin? Brother? No, you he hates. You he will destroy completely. He will tear you to pieces and grind you into dust. Not for what you are, but for what you could be and are not.
Yeah.
Then the Varkalak picks Hellboy up, roars Hellboy at him, and then Hellboy wakes up. It was a vision. The Countess had tried to bamboozle him. The stakes are the comic ends.
Okay.
So there you go. This film, I would grind it to dust.
Yeah.
Not for what it is, but for all it could be. And it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. That's about the size of it. Diminishing returns on these
Hellboy films? I agree.
I wonder if we should really...
If we should, we have to do the Crooked Man, I'm afraid.
No, well, of course we're going to do that. I was just worried about what are we going to do when we get to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and we've got like 7 movies to get through. Are we going to try to do them all?
Bold assuming the podcast will last that long.
Yeah. Okay, so please like, subscribe, rate and review on whatever your platform is. Please join our Patreon, where there are still no rewards, but we definitely need help keeping the lights on. Please visit us on Facebook, because we're posting fun stuff on there all the time. By the way, Ramona Fraden, longtime artist on Brenda Starr, retired at the age of 97.
Amazing.
Just this past week. All that kind of fun news stuff is probably on the
You won't
Facebook
get that
page.
unless you get on the Facebook page. Never mind that we just told you.
Yeah. And yeah, that's it. Okay, so next week will be our Australia Day special. So we're going to do a double. We're going to do The Kid Stakes from 1927, silent film, and Fatty Finn from 1980. They're both based on the Fatty Finn comic strip, which you cannot find anywhere except for the National Library of Australia website, where you can you can look for old newspaper pages. You can search for Fatty Finn. And on Trove. And,
well done.
Find out. I've downloaded a couple hundred pages, so we'll be
brilliant.
Reading as many
Your
of those
tax
as we can
dollars at
stomach.
work, Australia.
Yeah, absolutely.
And listeners abroad, well, lucky you.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Bold assuming we have listeners abroad.
Yeah. Yeah.